Thought Bubble Audio.
Look, up in the sky!
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Welcome to Beer with Geeks with Tim and Frank.
Who are you?
I'm Batman.
I am Iron Man.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
My name is Inigo Montoya.
You're a wizard, Harry.
A couple of guys with a couple of beers and a whole lot of pop culture nostalgia.
Make it so, number one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
Named the dog Indiana.
Life finds a way.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Now sit back and crack open a cold one, because it's time for Beer with Geeks.
It comes in pints?
Shaken, not stirred.
Great Scott!
I was way off. I knew it started with an S, though.
Hi, and welcome to Beer with Geeks, where two geeks geek out with beer. I'm Tim, and with me for the first time, the second time, the third time?
First time.
The first time on this show.
podcast.
Oh, it's so confusing. For the first time on Beer with Geeks, but a constant guest star on Academy Rewind is Lisa from I Love That Movie podcast. How are you, Lisa?
Hey, Tim. Doing well. I'm excited. This is a topic, two things that are up my alley. What we're talking about, because I don't want to spoil it if you're going to introduce it.
I will introduce it after we
And
talk
beer.
about what we're drinking. Yeah, so let's start so let's start with the beer. What are you drinking today?
So I'm drinking the Backyard Rodeo Pilsner, and this is a beer from a local brewery that is close to our heart. It opened during the pandemic, and Nick even created, my husband, created some of the bar taps that they use at festivals. Like, he crafted out of wood and then
That's so
cast
cool.
and-
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, like, they've just always been so good to us, and they have such great drinks. I don't think you could get it all over the States yet, but anyway, they have a really good Pilsner, and it's called Backyard Rodeo. And I figured, I'm from Texas, I should bring that Texas.
You should bring that
flavor
Texas
to you.
flair. Yeah, I agree. I love a good Pilsner, too. It's one of my favorites. Like, yeah. And America's obsession with the IPA. Like, everyone loves an IPA.
And my husband's obsession as well. So,
yeah, see, there you go. Yeah. And so, I don't know if it's like part of me were like, I got to be a little different, but I'm like, what about the Pilsners and the lagers and the stouts? Like, they need love too, don't they? Yeah.
The sours, the saisons. Yeah.
I love sours. Saisons I
Me
can't
too.
always do because coriander tastes like soap to me. I'm one of those people. So saisons usually have it, so I get I get nervous around saison.
Well, I didn't even know that. I learned something new, and I've been on a bunch of brewery tours, and yet I didn't know that. So.
See, and I only know that because I know that after years of trying them, I go, every time it's just
You're like,
dishwasher.
what don't I like?
Yeah, but it's that sudsy quality. So I do not like that. Mine does not have any coriander in it. I have drunk this on the show before, but I am drinking Sam Adams, which is truly nothing special in terms of this show because we drink it all the time. But I'm drinking a Golden Goat because we are talking about the goat as the topic for this week's episode. So Golden Goat, crisp and easy. It's good. It's the regular Sam Adams lager can be a little heavy, and Goat is a kind of a light, crispy. Veering on Pilsner, I would say. So I like it a lot. It's very good.
I've been to the Sam Adams Brewery.
Have you? Really?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh,
I've been to Boston several times, and
I didn't know that.
Yes, Boston's one of my favorite cities, actually.
Tell me more about your love of my favorite city.
So, I went there for work a lot, and I didn't know what to expect when I first got there, but I love how walkable the city is.
Totally.
The public transportation is awesome, but you could literally walk almost anywhere. And so I took advantage of a work trip one time, and I flew my husband out using some points for his birthday. And one of the best parts of that trip was we went to the Sam Adams Brewery.
Nice.
And we had a great time. It was, I think, shortly after the Boston bombing, actually.
Okay.
And I remember that because they still had on tap every year. They make a beer for the Boston Marathon. Mm-hmm. And they still had the beer on tap, and we tried it right after around that time when that had happened. Like, I literally flew out like the week after that happened, and I was even staying in like Copley Plaza, like where it happened, and I had to like move hotels because the hotel that I was going to stay at was like under construction or being used by news people or not under construction. Being used by like news people had moved in and they kicked me out. And so I moved to another hotel. Wow. And it was closed, and then they opened like right when I flew in. It was pretty weird.
That is pretty
so
weird. So
I had been there before that, but
yeah, you would have been there the last week in April of, what was that, 2013? 2012, 2013?
It was a while ago, and I know my husband's birthday is in May, so that makes sense that the timing of it was kind of like right around there. But
the only reason that it's always that the Marathon Monday is Patriots Day, around here. But I was on April vacation and I was in Greece on a ferry on the way to Italy with a bunch of kids from the school. We were on a school trip when we found out about the bombing.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, so April vacation is like that event is like seared into my memory. Yeah. Constantly associate that.
But I went there several times, and I've been to several breweries actually in Boston. Been to Harpoon.
Harpoon is a great brewery. I've done Harpoon.
Yeah. They're so good to you there. They just put you in a room and they go, just go ham for like an hour, and you just they give you like little cups, you drink whatever you want. That was fun. Yeah. But yeah, Sam Adams, that was a fun thing, and I like Sam Adams beer.
I do too.
They have a good Oktoberfest too.
They do have a good Oktoberfest. Yeah. They're there's at least one every season that you can pin and go, that's a good one. That's a good, like, you can't go wrong. Yeah. I think they're like just general Sam Adams is one of their like, not worse because it makes it sound bad, but like I
prefer
most
basic,
some of
maybe.
They're basic. Yeah. Their seasonals, some of their seasonals are great. There's one, a red beer, I think it's called Red Brick, if I can't remember, but you can only get it on tap in Boston. You can't get it in a store. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's so good.
Nice.
But
yeah, I love Sam Adams.
I'm glad that you love Sam Adams, and I'm glad that you love Boston. Like, it is such a walkable
It truly is. Boston and Chicago, those are my two favorites. I can't go back there enough.
That's I've never been to, I've been to the airport in Chicago, but
that's a nightmare.
It was it was interesting. I was on my way to South Bend to go to Notre Dame. So it was this like, just like, I'm just going to chill in this airport. But I had so much time that it wasn't terrible getting through it. But, like, airports are big, and I love airports so very much. I love just hanging out in airports. But the ceilings in that place, like, they just go on forever. Like, it's wild. Yeah. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Boston or airports. We're here to talk about what I consider to be one of the GOATs of television right now, and that is Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Paramount Plus's latest Star Trek show. So I asked Lisa to come on because Lisa loves Star Trek.
I do.
Yeah, so can you talk about Star Trek, like your relation to Star Trek, before we talk about the show?
Sure. So part of the reason why I like Star Trek so much is one of my closest friends, my best friend growing up, Kara, was a huge Trekkie. And it actually took me a while to get into it as much as she did. I would say I was probably a teenager when I found the perfect Trek show for me. I'd seen TNG. TNG was so big. I mean, it was like Game of Thrones or something.
It was, and that's such a great way to talk about. Yeah, it
was weird. Like, everyone was into Star Trek at that time. But then the one that I really connected with was Deep Space Nine. I think because it was more political, more kind of on the cusp of sociological problems and progress, and I just liked that. At the time, everyone hated it, but I liked it. So I became more of a Trekkie, and that turned me on to the rest of Star Trek, and I got more and more into it. So she was the big, actually, the original series fan. The first time we went to a convention was to see William Shatner when we were like 12 or 13. But yeah, my love for it grew. I ended up like going to they called it the Grand Slam. Back in the day, the biggest Star Trek convention was in Pasadena, and it had like everybody, and like I got tons of signatures, and I was maybe 16 at that time when I went to that. But yeah, Star Trek was probably the first big fandom I had. I mean, that was what got me going to conventions. I went to conventions like that before comic or other kinds. Mm-hmm. And it's just never gone away. And I don't want to get too personal into this, but I had kind of a rough couple of years in the past couple of years. And I find whenever I'm down or upset, I kind of end up going back to Star Trek because Star Trek has just sort of always been there for me.
I love that. It's beautiful. And Star Trek is so optimistic at its heart, right? Like, yes. Good Star Trek is at the end, you should feel like you've been wrapped in a nice warm blanket, and like in some ways, obviously bad things happen and people can get hurt and whatever else, but the outlook that the future has is just like, it just makes you feel better, even when like there's war or whatever. Like, just the endless possibilities of the future is just it's just an awesome thing to sink your teeth into.
For sure. I think that Star Trek is unique in that way. When you look at a lot of other sci-fi, it tends to focus on sort of a, post-apocalyptic or dystopian future. That's really common for us to sort of examine the problems of today by looking at like what could happen. But I think Star Trek is so different because it is optimistic. It's this idealized future. In fact, a lot of people would criticize and say it's a little too idealized, but I think that's why it's attracted so many people into different fields of like work even. You hear all the time about people that become pilots or become doctors or engineers because they watch Star Trek, because it did have such a positive influence on them. Yeah, look at this future where we're working together. It's like, that's, I think, such a positive thing. So
it is. I mean, even the cell phone exists because of Star Trek, right? The Nokia guys.
It looks like a tricorder or something.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, the Nokia guys were like, we watched Star Trek growing up, and we thought, like, what if we could do that in real life? And the cell phone was born. Like,
I guess more the communicator.
The communicator, yeah, the tricorder. Yeah, I wish
tricorder
was real. That
is like our iPad, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah. If it could diagnose, why my joint hurts, for no reason.
We do need that.
Yeah,
we're not there
really
yet, but we should be.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're so close.
Mm-hmm.
I've spoken about Star Trek on the show before, but just for you, my, I had seen TNG. I used to go to my friend's house and it was like always on, like, because the people in the house watched it, and so like I watched a bunch of that. I saw those movies my parents got for me. The first Star Trek I think I ever watched was Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which turned me off from Star Trek for quite some time.
Yeah, that's not the best example.
No, it is truly not. But I'd seen the show like off and on and like whatever else, and so I was like aware, and I liked it enough, but not as like a fandom. Just like it just existed. And then J.J. Abrams' 2009 movie came out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that like really sold me on Star Trek, and I was like, oh boy,
good.
This is the good stuff. And then it's been a kind of a slow build from there. My father-in-law is the biggest Trekkie I know. He loves Star Trek, watches it, especially original series, watches it all the time. He's got ships and posters and signatures and like all that stuff. And so we talk Star Trek a lot, and that's helped build it up. But truthfully, it's been these Paramount Plus shows over even just these past couple of months that have like really helped. I had COVID in April, and so I watched Discovery. Because I watched the first season or half of it, and I was like, no, and so I ended up going back and watching the rest, and I really liked it. And then I did the same thing to Picard. I got halfway through the first season. I was like, I'm not feeling it. And then I did it again, and I loved it. And so I was so hyped for Strange New Worlds. I was like, so, like, because original Enterprise, Pike, Spock, Uhura, and I just wanted to see these characters again. And for me, it has completely lived up to, like, exactly what I've wanted from a Star Trek show since Paramount was like, we're going to make new Star Trek shows. Like, this is what I kind of been waiting for.
I agree.
Yeah. What do you like best? What do you like best about the show? What draws you in the most?
So, a couple of things. When I first saw the character Pike on Discovery, I have been a fan of Discovery. And I've been, there have been some criticisms that it's a little too dark, that it's deviated away from what we know and love about Star Trek. Mm-hmm. And I would say that, if you were to look at like The Next Generation, and even some of the earlier, I guess, TNG movies that changed the uniforms, they changed how the Klingons looked. This isn't brand new to Star Trek to change how creatures look, to change the uniforms, to change a vibe, to change the style. Like that, I always embrace that Star Trek could be several different things.
Absolutely, that's how good franchises survive in some ways.
They're trying to adapt. To this new style of movie where it's really more serial. We've shifted away from the villain of the week or alien of the week in Star Trek. So that's, I think, where a lot of that comes from with Discovery. However, when they introduced the character of Pike, who, like you said, is an original character from the original series. He's the captain that mans the Enterprise before Kirk does, and has a tragic end. When I saw him, I was really excited because I'm actually a pretty big fan of the actor, Anson Mount, who plays him.
Awesome. Yeah.
I was a fan of the show Hell on Wheels. I feel like almost no one watched that, but I watched it pretty religiously. And I really liked him as an actor. I thought, and this was kind of back, I feel like, when Twitter and Facebook, like, actors were getting more on social media, and he was a very accessible celebrity because he wasn't really super famous. So he was like interacting one-on-one with fans on Twitter and on Facebook. And so, in fact, they would drive him crazy until he would like have to take these big breaks from social media because social media is awful. But he was always so nice on there. You almost felt like you were getting to know him. And so I've kind of followed his career. Felt so bad for him when Inhumans happened. I was like,
me too.
Oh no.
Yeah. Because you could watch him and be like, you're really good. The rest of it is not.
I was like, he's a good actor and he seems like a good person. So I was like, anyways, when he got this show, or when he got this cameo, I was like, yay. And like, there was such a positive response. And then they announced that they were going to give him his own spinoff. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Then that kind of died down, we didn't hear anything for a while, and then Strange New Worlds happened, and I'm just right out of the gate, I'm like, yay, this guy that I want good things for is going to be on this ship. And then I think what Stranger Things has done really well, because it is truly a return to the spirit of the original series, which is a lot more optimistic. It is more villain of the week, but I think it's like a nice break. Like, it's just a show where I can just have fun and enjoy it, and then it's over, instead of, nowadays, like, everything is bingeable, everything is like a commitment. And I feel like this show is a show you can just truly like watch an episode and get what's going on and come back later and to another one, and you don't have to have that big commitment. So
I agree. Yeah, and I can testify to that because of my wife, who grew up in the house with her father, loving Star Trek, and so like she like is like enough aware of it. No, I wouldn't say a fan, but she's like, I tolerate it. It's around. It's alive. It's fine. It's whatever. So I was sitting and watching one of the episodes with T'Pring. Like where she comes aboard the ship and they swap minds and whatever else. And
oh my
and
gosh, yes.
So she's watching the show, and I am like not enough a fan to like, T'Pring sounds familiar. Like, I know that she has a relationship with Spock. I can't remember exactly what it is, whatever. And so my wife is like, oh, that's Spock's wife, right? And I was like, is it? Do they really get married? She's like, yeah, they get married, and then they get She knew just from living in the house that she grew up in. But like, she walked in, figured out what was going on immediately because everyone's color coded. So like, it's like easy to know who everyone's role is, and you're like, obviously that's Spock. Like, you have a vague memory of Pike. Oh, that's Uhura. That's cool that she's in the show. Like, and then Scotty's not here yet. It's that guy. And okay, cool. And then like. That, and then she was out.
Kevin or Kyle, I can't remember his name. But...
instead of Scott, I don't know. I'm really bad with names. Like, really, I'm so bad.
It's something
with
like Kevin
names.
or Kyle, and it sounded funny to me, even though Scotty's like a regular name too. But I was just like, Kyle. That's her engineer, Kyle, or whatever it was. But yeah.
Yeah, well, because you get other names like Uhura and Hemmer and like all these things in here, like Kyle. And you don't belong here, Kyle. You don't belong. Yeah, so I agree about Anson Mount. Actually, one of the reasons I went back to watch Discovery was because I knew that he and Spock were in season 2, and I was looking forward to Strange New Worlds, and so I was like, I should watch Discovery first because they're in that season. And he was on screen for maybe 10 seconds, and I was like, I can't wait. I can't wait. He's so good. I love him so much.
He's very good.
Yeah.
And he's very, very different from Kirk. I think another thing that I like about this show and about him as a captain is that he's a lot more diplomatic and collaborative. So in some ways it's like a return to the old, but it also feels kind of more modern, like a more modern take on leadership.
Yes.
Because he's not really like, Kirk was like a guns a-blazing maverick type. Mm-hmm. And that really worked in the 60s. And they make a good case for it even on the show like that. Oh my gosh, that season finale was so good. But anyway.
Yeah, we will talk about the finale specifically. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I like that I feel like he leads by growing others. And I really, really like that. I'm a big fan of this idea about like, raising up other leaders, which I feel like is Pike's leadership style. And I don't think I think Picard's maybe like the closest to that. Yep. He's also kind of like a little bit more at a distance, but more hands-on than Pike is. And I've just really liked the way that he interacts with his crew. Also, there's a lot of women on the bridge, like more women than I think we've ever seen before on the bridge. So that's kind of an interesting thing too.
Well, I mean, it's not really a fault of the show going back to the 60s. The 60s, it was big for the time, right? You had an Asian pilot, you had a black lady answering the space phone. It was like it was as advanced as you could
Russian
get.
kid
a Russian kid in the 60s,
during the Cold War. Yeah, it's
right. So
crazy,
it really was pushing the envelope in certain areas, and so it's nice to see. It's nice to see it. Not pushing, but just like being, right? Just as the original series was. But it's weird to like see that bridge filled with women and diversity, more diversity, and then to go back and be like, look at all those white men. Look at all,
well, one
look
thing
at the
I
original
noticed
series.
Is in the pilot of the show, which I think the pilot still had Pike as the captain.
Yes,
I believe.
it did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And his number one was a woman because I think Spock's character was initially envisioned as like a lady. It's kind of weird because in the pilot she's like in love with the captain. It's like they didn't get all the way there, but you see where they were trying to go. And also they don't all have dresses on. They had pants.
Yes, that is.
So I really feel like a lot of those changes were like the studio being like, we need a man in that role. Like we need women to be in dresses, and So I think some of the vision kind of got changed just by the studio coming in.
Just Desilu being like, we can only push you so far because we're taking a chance on this in the first place. So like, you have to meet us somewhere. So that's okay. It's fine.
It's nice that now they kind of are able to do something. Have more women on the bridge, have more women wearing pants. Women can wear pants too.
It's amazing.
So it's kind of like a really good blend of old and new, and it's just it's really good. I think I love the silliness of it. I saw some people criticizing some episodes of Picard, saying like, "Oh, well, why would this happen?" or logically, why would that? And I'm like, y'all.
Do you even
Star
watch
Trek
Star
has
Trek?
Some nonsense in it, okay?
Like the first
whimsical.
the first season of Star Trek when he's like wearing an eye patch and he's like, "Oh, this is my disguise." I'm like, that's Star Trek. That's just as much Star Trek as the finale of Strange New Worlds, right? Or First Contact or whatever. Yeah, I saw some criticism
hard
for
sci-fi, really.
No, it's not. No. It's like al dente pasta sci-fi. Like it's like kind of soft, but kind of hard. Yeah.
There's more technobabble than say Star Wars, right? And it's definitely a more cleaner, more organized, more militaristic look to everything. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's got some nonsense, we love that for Star Trek. Like we want the nonsense.
Oh yeah, one of my favorite episodes of this season was the fairy tale episode.
Oh, that was so cute. And that really did. Again, it felt like such a return to like TNG had a bunch of stuff like that. Like in one of the Deep Space Nine episodes, the bad guy was Rumpelstiltskin. I mean, that was a bad episode, but point is, you need some of that like whimsy sometimes. I think it helps like especially when other episodes cover stuff that's dark, you kind of need a couple silly ones to fill us or to get us back there. I almost said filler, but they're not really filler.
They're not, because there's still character development, so I can't remember that doctor's name.
He's the guy from Dune.
He is the guy from Dune. Oh, thank you.
Stilgar? No. Stilgar
no, he
is
did not
Javier
play
Bardem.
Stilgar.
He was, gosh, I can't remember that character's name, but he's the guy that he fights to the death. Janus, yeah.
Janus, yeah.
Yeah, he's really, there's more about him in the book, but in the movie, you only see him for a little bit. But me and my husband were like, that guy's so familiar. And then we're like, oh, it's the guy from Dune. And I think he was in Black Mirror, too.
I'll use my one. We do this thing where we do a one lookup thing where you whatever you like. You can't spend time just Google searching. So like,
oh, I know that's my brain wants to go down that rabbit hole.
But I used mine because I had to know his name, so I'm in that rabbit hole. So it's Dr. Mbenga, and it was Jamis, and you said he was also in Black Sails.
I think he was in Black Mirror.
Yes, he was in Black Mirror, not Black Sails. Yeah,
and he just has such a distinctive voice, like a very cool voice.
It's cool.
And he's very
handsome. Soothing. He is very handsome.
Yeah,
there's a lot of handsome men on this show. I've got like guy crushes on a bunch of them. Pike.
Yeah,
Ethan
after
Peck.
the show,
not necessarily Spock, but Ethan
Everyone
Peck.
Is beautiful.
Like, everyone is very beautiful on that bridge. It's pretty.
I beg to differ with not necessarily Spock.
I mean, that's for you, but I love Gregory Peck, so like watching his grandson is just I
didn't realize that his dad was Gregory Peck. What?
Yeah, his grandfather is Gregory Peck. So like, and you can if you look at him, you're like, you're absolutely related. There's no question. It's pretty wild.
That is so bizarre. I need to Google that later. But I love his Spock so much.
Me too.
I think he's very great.
I think we've been blessed with 3 quality Spocks, and I think
100%.
That's pretty. It's Chief Kyle. I'm looking at the IMDb page right now.
Oh, Kyle. Okay,
Chief Kyle.
Okay, so we're right. I thought later it's gonna be Kevin or some other name, but
you were totally right. Chief Kyle. Yeah, no, there's everybody in the show. I think just like I don't find there's a weak link in the cast. Like every time whoever is on screen demands my attention, and I just think that's really lovely. Whether it's Ortega's or Pike or Spock or Nurse Chapel, who I think might be my favorite. She's just
Nurse Chapel. Doesn't she kind of look like Cara Delevingne a little bit?
Yeah, totally. I could totally. Yeah, it's almost like not Rose Byrne. My gosh, what's her name? What was Batwoman? What's her the first one? You know to whom I speak.
Oh yeah, I can't remember. Her name is Rose something.
Yeah, what is her?
Yeah, she was a model, right? Like before, and she was on a.
I already used my one lookup, so I can't look it up.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Well,
can't do it. It doesn't matter. So.
But yeah, Nurse Chapel is really pretty, and a good character.
Yes, that's it. I was going. I think everybody's a good character, and and truthfully, I was like, I really got attached to spoilers for Strange New Worlds, which we've actually been very good at. But I'm going to spoil Strange New Worlds now. I got really attached to Hemmer, and so I can't believe that he died. Like I was like
so upset. Like I almost couldn't accept it.
I didn't. I like truly didn't accept it until like. I watched the Ready Room episode, which I had not done previously. I hadn't watched any Ready Room, and then the actor was like, "Yes, they told me that I was going to die when I took the part. Like that, I knew that going into it."
Why?
And I was like, "Oh, so you really are dead? Okay, great. Okay."
That sucks. I don't know. They could still bring it back somehow. I don't know.
I don't know.
I'll hold that hope for the rest of my life.
In my mind, I know they eventually that whole crew, unless it's a Horror or Spock, eventually has to be replaced with the original series crew. I know they can go on different ships. They don't have to die. I know, but things like do have to happen that they move on. And Hemmer is Scotty's role, so right because he's like eventually has to be Mr. Scott.
I know, but it's so upsetting. I loved Hemmer so much. He was so grumpy, and I love grumpy characters. He was a curmudgeon, but he was so loving.
So wise, and he just loved life, even though he didn't feel like he did. Yeah, he was great. He was just wonderful. Yeah, and truthfully, he was a real alien character, and I thought that was really refreshing to see. Yeah, I thought that was very refreshing to see on, on the Enterprise.
And the actor is legally blind in real life, so I thought that was kind of a cool twist.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
See? Yeah.
So I thought that was cool because, we had that character Geordi that LeVar Burton played beautifully.
Yep.
But it does beg the question, right? Like, why don't they have more characters that have different disabilities, and why couldn't you hire actors that have those? So I think that was really cool to do with that Hemmer character. I mean, they didn't have to do it that way, but I think it's good that they did because it's kind of cool.
And that's not a question that people were asking in 1989. So, like, I can,
you
forgive Geordi,
Like, it's not a question a lot of people ask now. I mean, a lot of times in movies now, like, the characters are, are played by actors that don't have that necessarily. But I'm not saying it has to be that way every time, but it's cool to give more parts to people,
That is true.
There are actors out there that are blind, or that they cannot hear, or something else. It's like they should have roles too. And so I think Star Trek's a good show to do that with, because it is about a future where everyone's working together with different backgrounds.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about this finale. Let's talk about the finale. I mean, we could. There's so much on the show. We talking about a whole season in a very short amount of time. So it's great. We know it's great. But instead of going episode by episode or anything like that, let's just talk about the finale, because what a finale. I was so immensely satisfied. The quality of mercy, a Shakespeare reference and a Twilight Zone reference all in one. The Twilight Zone episode with Leonard Nimoy so good. It's a for those listening who didn't watch, it's a retelling, different orientation, I guess, of now I can't remember the name of the episode. Terror. Oh my gosh, Terror. Oh my god.
I don't know. This is where, it's like I'm good at certain details and not others, but I don't remember the name of the episode.
I can't either. So, a terror in space, a terror in something. If with your permission, can I use your lookup to look that up?
Go for it.
Use that?
Take it.
Cool.
Take it away.
It is A Balance of Terror. That's what it's called.
Okay. I didn't even realize that, to be honest. It's been a while since I've watched the original series, so I didn't realize that. I didn't know
watching it. I went back afterward to, I listened to Technological, which is a friend of ours on the show, is a co-host of a Star Trek podcast, and so I listened to that episode, and they were talking about it being, cool. This mirror thing where it's like it's originally Kirk addressing this problem, of the meeting Romulans for the first time, and instead of it being this Cold War, it becomes this very open war. And so you get this retelling, what if Pike is Captain of the Enterprise instead? And it is cool to see, like, they use the same lines, some of the way, like when the camera dollies in on Spock and he raises his eyebrow, that is shot for shot the original series. Like, that's all. Wow. Yeah, it's very cool. I went back and watched the episode after I finished the finale, and it's worth your time. It's very cool. But yeah, what a finale! Just to see Pike's, I think, everything that he's been working towards or working against lead to this moment, and then to really make a huge sacrificial play in the way that great Star Trek captains do. For some reason, mostly in the name of Spock. Right?
Because everyone loves Spock.
Who doesn't love Spock? This guy's future is more important than yours, and to be humbly accept that notion. It was really a beautiful episode to watch.
Well, this is probably the only thing like this, because it's just such a cool setup. The fact that he precedes Kirk. And Kirk and Spock go on to have this ripple effect. I think because it's the first show, they end up having this ripple effect in the Star Trek universe, where they're so incredibly important. It's so important that Kirk is the captain of the Enterprise. And so this kind of leads into that. It's such a good way to kind of eventually phase Pike out, because ultimately he's got to give up that chair to Kirk, and if he doesn't, then all these things are going to happen because Kirk and Spock are not in charge, you know? Yep. And it's so interesting because it's like all the stuff that I praised Pike for, this is the one time that's the worst way to go. He's extremely diplomatic. He always wants to find a solution that doesn't involve going in guns blazing. And that's the opposite of Kirk. And it just so happens that at this pivotal moment in the timeline, if they don't go with Kirk's tactics, we face a real war, you know? So it does kind of make a good point about how, like, it's okay to be passive and it's okay to be diplomatic, but there are always going to be instances where that's not the right choice. Yep. And for whatever reason, that's just not Pike's strong point. And of course, they set up in the episode that they tried a bunch of different ways, right? And like, no matter what, if he doesn't die, then, you know, good things won't happen. And Pike has really been wrestling the whole season with this idea of knowing his mortality. Most people don't know their mortality. Mm-hmm. Some people kind of do, you know, depending on if they're sick or something like that. Mm-hmm. But, you know, how does that impact your day-to-day life? And I don't think we've seen a character... I'm going to wait for that to die down.
Oh, it doesn't
Sorry.
really matter. It's okay.
So
yeah,
okay.
whatever. I'm not going to edit that out. It doesn't matter.
I live near a street, and so there's only...
I also live near a street. Interesting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh,
it's
good.
Like, sometimes it sounds like I'm outside. I'm like, I promise I'm inside.
No, the firehouse is like 30 seconds down the road
okay.
me, so, yeah.
Same.
It's, yeah.
So, I think that, you know, seeing a character that's faced with his mortality in the way that Pike is, we've never seen that before, and I think it's a really interesting perspective. And then, like you said, learning that, like, as important as he is, he's not pivotal to the timeline beyond when he's going to die. Mm-hmm. And in fact, he's detrimental. And so the fact that he has to, like, humbly accept that and choose to sacrifice himself for the greater good. I mean, they just set up such a brilliant way of him being like, yeah, this is what I've got to do.
Yeah, it is truly the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Like, it is that. But to even, like, know that Spock is there and privy to that information, even, like, then furthers his sacrifice way later in Khan when he's like, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Like, I watched somebody who was very close to me make this same decision, and I am also going to make it.
I hadn't even thought about that.
I thought of it right now. This is the conversation.
Deep.
Yeah, it's
deep.
It's good. I mean, it's good. Well, I watched the Ready Room for the finale, and it's Ethan Peck getting interviewed, and they, you know, and Will Wheaton said, you know, like, how do you feel what is your relationship to Pike as Spock? And he's like, well, I see he's kind of like, he's like, you know, kind of like a father and an uncle and a big brother and, like, all these things kind of wrapped into
Definitely
one.
a mentor.
Totally, because their moment, like, you mean a lot to me, too, is they're like, I love you, man. I love you so much, you know, and that's, like, as close as they're going to get as, you know, figures of authority, you know, at work.
Yeah, it's professional still.
Yeah, but it's like, I love you, man, like, big hug. That's their moment. And so, like, Spock takes a lot of his diplomacy, I think, from watching Pike, you know, the ultimate, like, one of the ultimate diplomats, because that's what Spock ends up becoming, right? You know, like, he is the great, you know, the galaxy's, you know, the great galaxy diplomat. So, yeah, it's just great to see all of that without the show, like, being like, hey, guess what? This is what is happening. You know, like, it just lets it,
right.
It lets it be.
And isn't it like the ultimate example of sort of, you know, the master takes his pupil as far as he can go, and then he exceeds him. You know, that's what happens with Kirk. But at the same time, Kirk and Spock don't exist without Pike. I feel like the show's doing a really good job of setting up that he's a big influence on both of them. And you know, don't we all wish we could go back in time and see somebody get to greatness? And that's kind of what Pike gets to do now that he knows who Kirk goes on to be and how important he is. It's like he gets to see him at his inception when he's like this young hotshot that, like, again, just kind of pops off too much. He's going to grow into who Kirk becomes, and he gets to see him at the beginning. And I don't know, just all of that is so cool to me.
Yeah. How did you feel about Kirk in the final episode? Paul Wesley's Kirk.
I thought he did a good job, much like when we get different iterations of Spock. I'm starting to see that character as almost like James Bond, right? Like people can have different takes on the same character and embody that the core of who they are without necessarily duplicating or mimicking a performance. Gregory Peck has done an incredible job at that, and I think this Kirk, I see the parts of him that he's trying to get across. It's a very young Kirk. It's the Kirk before he has the Enterprise a little bit, and that we see in the episode.
I think it's even the Kirk that, because it's an alternate future, it's the Kirk that doesn't have the Enterprise, which would also form the kind of person that he is. So if he's on the Farragut, like the type of captain he is, like how he got to the Farragut instead of the Enterprise is even different. So like we're not really looking at classic Kirk, we're looking at this weird alternative Kirk. So he's like, I didn't love him, but I can also look at it and be like, this isn't the Kirk I know because it's not the future I know. And so I'm curious to see what choices this version of Kirk makes in the future. Because you know that because it's not an alternative timeline. If he shows it when he shows up again, you know, he has to kind of fit the mold of. It doesn't have to be Shatner, but he has to be recognizable, like in a way that Chris Pine didn't have to be Shatner. That he's got a kind of a tougher, like, feel the head. Ethan Peck still feels like Spock, still feels like Leonard Nimoy, even though he's making his own decisions. It all feels connected and together, and so I await that to happen for this version of Kirk.
I felt like we're seeing a Kirk that's very frustrated by the restraints that are on him. He's not the Kirk that's gotten to be in the position of authority that he knows he should be in.
That's very good. I had not considered that.
Yeah, and I think like because the Enterprise was sort of thrust upon him in the way that Pike passes away, I think he just kind of got handed the reins and he runs with it, and that's where he thrives. And I think this other version of him didn't get that opportunity. And I think Pike, that's why Pike's like, he's cocky, he's like popping off, he's like not following procedure, like he brings up things like that, and yet he recognizes that in a pivotal moment when Kirk starts kind of like, when he's under pressure, he comes up with all these ideas. He's an ideas guy. He's got that personality type.
Yep. That's a good point.
And so that's where he's the best. But I think when you restrain him too much and you try to keep him in a box, he's not going to shine. And I think he comes across a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more negative than he even means to. He's just trying to tell him the whole episode, like, I just can tell this isn't going to work. And, the way that Starfleet does things is great, but it's not going to work. And he tries to tell them that the whole episode. They never really listen to him. And I think that's why he gets so angry. And then in the end, they realize he was right. And then it's like too late. So I think that's why Spock was always his little, I guess,
he's his shoulder compass. Angel. Yeah.
And so he could help bring him back down to earth. But I think he needs that balance. But without a Spock, he's, I think, just a little bit more.
He's a loose cannon. Yeah, I even not just Spock. Like he needs Bones, just as much as he needs Spock, and he doesn't have that in this alternate reality.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I mean, I think with Star Trek, it is about. It's so different from other shows because in a lot of other shows, it's all about the captain. But Star Trek has always been different because it's about the whole crew. Like the whole crew matters, and they all have very specific parts to play, but it's not just about the captain.
Yep, I agree. Even if it is, like, apart from most of Discovery, it's not the captain's point of view. Like, it is the captain's POV, but it's not strictly about them, like you said, right? Like, everybody matters. And I actually really like this show that each episode focuses on a different character. Like, it gives, Una or Khan, whose name I cannot remember, her first name, or... or Spock or whatever. It's not just Pike's captain's log. It's not just captain's log; it's everybody's log. And
yeah,
I've been enjoying that very much on this.
I don't know what other show would elevate like the doctor and the engineer and everybody almost like they're as important as the captain.
Exactly, the ensign.
I think again that's another thing that I like about Star Trek in general is that it's always kind of made several different jobs seem just as important. The captain is pausing and referring to that expert and asking them to weigh in a way that you don't see on a lot of other shows. And yeah, so it's about the dream team. It's not just about Kirk. It's like if all these people don't come together, then they have a big impact together.
Yeah.
No one does it alone, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, because Kirk is on a different ship and he is kind of doing it alone, and this is partly the outcome. So it's you need Kirk's enterprise, not just Kirk. And it's awesome. Any final thoughts on Strange New Worlds? Anything that you want to like kind of take us home with? Boldly go with, I should say.
Where should I boldly go? Well, I just really think that if you're looking for a Star Trek to kind of segue into, like if you've always thought about tiptoeing into this universe, it's a good place to start even, because I think it's a very fun, crowd-pleasing show. I think a lot of different people could really get into it, and maybe it'll open the door for all the other universes, and then maybe someday you'll be as nuts as I am and like be obsessed with all of it. But I think the show it has a lot of heart. It's got a great cast and great storylines, great writing, and great music, and I'm in love with it. I love it.
Yeah, me too. I'm totally in love with it, and I just I love it. It feels like a natural part of what has existed before, but it's still blazing a new style at the same time. It's really a remarkable feat, and I can't wait for the second season. I'm very excited.
Yeah,
so
me too.
Well, thank you for joining us. I will say that you can follow Beer with Geeks at beerwithgeeks.com and Twitter and Facebook. Probably not Facebook anymore. I have no idea. But you can email us at Gmail. You can follow me at TimothyPeachy13 on Twitter. You can rate and review us on iTunes. Find us at other places podcasts can be found, pretty much all of the places. And you can support us at patreon.com/thoughtbubbleaudio. Lisa, plug yourself.
Sure. You can find me at Twitter at ILTM Podcast. I'm also on Instagram at I Love That Movie Podcast. And you can find us pretty much wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search I Love That Movie. And I look forward to talking with y'all.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. If you just love positive, good people talking about movies that they love and everyone just having a good time, I Love That Movie is
good people like Tim.
Yeah, I haven't been on in a while, but you
need to come back.
I would love to come back. I would love to come back. So, thank you so much for being here. You are welcome back at any time. Until next time, cheers.
Cheers.